I'm looking cautiously to 2024. A lot of other shippers are finally figuring out what I've known all along. You still have the spray and pray, you still have the dialing for Dollary. You're trying to understand me, you're not just kind of glossing over and trying to take a shortcut.
What is happening in the shipper world today? We've got my good friend John Brewer with us today to talk all about Shipper's Corner. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Sales Chatter. Today, I've got a great show for you, and I'm so excited. You know, we're always trying to bring people into the mix that can give you real-time data as to what's happening. And today, we've got a dear friend of mine, John Brewer, logistics manager, head of logistics at CKE, and he's going to talk all about what he sees in the market. So, John, welcome to the show, my friend. I'm so happy to have you back, brother.
Glad to be back as well. Always good to chat with you.
Yeah, I love it. And you know, John, you're one of I'm actually seeing a few more people like yourself in positions like yourself, you know, logistics managers, head of functionality at companies that are starting to step up on LinkedIn and talk on LinkedIn. And you know, you were one of the first ones that I've seen that started to kind of reach out and speak to people on LinkedIn. And I've got a big question for you because, you know, now that we're coming into the end of 2023, we've had some serious up and downs in the last 4 years. What are you seeing in the market today? What are you finding that you're kind of aligning with, or what are you finding that's catching your attention now that might not have caught your attention at the beginning of the year?
That is a very good question. There's a lot of conflicting information going on. If you look at media, maybe not so much LinkedIn, but more mainstream media, you're getting one message, and then if you look at the analysis that the financial institutions put out, you're getting a completely different message, and they're kind of at antithesis to each other. Um, Let me explain. I use a lot of financial institutional data to see what the market's doing.
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer in being an informed shipper, understanding the market. So when I do communicate with my carriers and my brokers, we're on the same page, and we're seeing the same thing. So I'll even poll my carriers and brokers just to see if they're getting something different than I am, just to kind of a litmus test, if you will, that the data I'm
Yep.
getting is good. One of my go-tos is the Morgan Stanley Freight Index and the Morgan Stanley Sentiment Survey. It's a really good, to me, it's a really good barometer. I've used it for years. Morgan Stanley Freight Index has kind of a supply demand barometer, and it's
Hmm.
basically a ratio of the number of loads out there to the number of trucks. And if the number is low, then it is a shipper's market, and if the number is high, it's a carrier's market. So if you have 20 loads to the truck, obviously the rates are going to go up and capacity is going to be tight. If you have four or less loads to the truck, then the rates are going to be lower, and you're going to have more capacity in the marketplace. And they do it for dry van, they do it for reefer, and they do it for flatbed. And Dan, if you're not on that, I can definitely turn you onto that. It's a really nice survey. Gives a lot of data points. And basically, what I'm seeing looking through that survey is that capacity is not tight and rates are low. And but if you talk to social media, if you listen to social media or mainstream media, they're like everybody's buying everything. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. 70 to 80% of all goods are transported, at least in my country, over the road. And those 70 to 80% of all goods are driven by mainly consumer confidence. So if consumers are confident about the market, you know this as well as I do, they're going to buy more, which means more product, which means more trucks being loaded. And so mainstream media is telling you that people are buying anything and everything they get their hands on, but Morgan Stanley is not. And I honestly, I just don't see it based on the data that I'm looking at. It still seems the freight market is soft. It's maybe not as soft as it was, but it's still soft. It's not, in my mind, what I would call healthy, where there is a balance of capacity versus a balance, basically more of a level set, if you will, of the marketplace where rates are reasonable and capacity is sustainable. And the shippers, it's not a shippers market, it's not necessarily a carriers market. Everybody's kind of getting along, if you will. And the other thing that I look at on the Morgan Stanley, and this is to me a real good barometer of the country, is I look at the flatbed capacity, the flatbed demand versus supply. Now, I don't ship anything on flatbed. Burgers and fries don't tend to fare very well on
Do
flatbeds.
very well on a flatbed.
However,
Although, it would be a party as a flatbed pulling in with a couple of barbecues on it, a couple of skids of burgers. You know what I'm saying? That would be a party.
there you go. However, the housing market uses flatbeds extensively. So, housing starts are typically one of the primary, in my opinion, one of the primary barometers of how an economy, where it's going to go next, right? If flatbed usage, if the capacity is tight, that means the housing market is up. And if the housing market is up, typically somewhere down the line, shortly after that, the economy will start to creep up as well. Because if people can buy houses, they can buy cars, they can buy TVs, blah, blah, blah. If flatbed capacity is not tight, then the housing market is down, and the economy is probably going to stay stagnant for some period of time. And so far, looking at that flatbed capacity, housing starts are not, they're not great. Okay.
Mhm.
You have some bubbles of capacity constraint in that market. Nashville's one of those places because everybody and their brother wants to come live here for some reason. But those are sporadic. Those are not, across the country. So those
Yeah,
are the
just
two
little
things.
pockets of areas where
Little,
people
yeah,
are
little
looking
pockets of area that's, it's mainly the destination is what's intriguing the people, and that's why they're coming. So in my mind, I see, 23 has been relatively flat, or less than flat. The market's been low, and I really don't see a lot going into 24. If you wanted me to give you an optimistic prediction, I would say second half of 24, it may pick up. If you want my pessimistic version, then it would be 25. Now,
for. Mhm.
we've got something coming out fall of next year that's going to greatly impact supply chain, and that's the presidential election. And I don't care who you
Yes.
vote for, I'm not a political guy, but everybody knows whoever gets that White House, sits in that White House, is going to drive which direction the economy is going to go. It's either going to go
Yes.
up or down. So it's a big mitigating factor. It always has been, regardless of who was running against who. It always will be. So
And we also saw prior to the 2016 election or during it, we saw that big push because I think it was Trump that was putting up the tariffs on China was one of his platforms he was running on.
right,
And people were looking at it and saying, okay, if he gets elected, we better push this product in before we get the new tariffs. Right. So
exactly,
like leading up to it and to leading up to the actual polls and voting day can drastically change our market as well.
absolutely. And then the other piece of it is good old Mother Nature. Um,
Yes.
if FEMA pulls a lot of capacity out of the system because of hurricanes, because of snowstorms, wildfires, earthquakes, tornadoes,
Polar
um,
vortexes, whatever the
it
case may be.
yeah, whatever. It's gonna, if they pull a lot of capacity out of the marketplace, then that's going to drive rates up. So
Mhm.
it's the bigger overreaching factors that drive supply chain in certain ways than others do. So that would be, I would go with consumer confidence. I would go with who's going to be the president, and I would go with good old force majeure.
So, my question for you then would be obviously with an intricate supply chain like you have, are you looking at 2024 and saying, okay, I got to be ready for rates to flip? Are you looking at all at the amount of carriers going out? Are you putting any thought or any process to? okay, how am I going to manage this if we flip back to, call it a carrier market where you're, 4-to-1 on loads versus trucks? Because we all know the market will flip. It's just a matter of when,
When
right? It will
exactly.
bring it back to whatever you want to call the baseline, for the last, what are we now, December. So for the last, I think it's for October, November, and then numbers aren't out for December. But for October, November, we had thousands less carriers coming in than were leaving. And a lot of
Exactly.
the ones that left, from some of the information Dean's been giving us, is they've gone more to like local niche markets, like, auto haulers and this kind of stuff, where it's not really on the impactful side of North American logistics.
Right.
What is your thought process? What are you kind of preparing for, or at least creating a, like a plan B for, coming into 2024?
Well, I'm looking cautiously to 2024. Cautiously optimistic. Hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yep.
The two biggest things that are on my radar right now are going to be supply chain visibility, and that's my supply chain, and also any type of how do we create leverage? Leverage minimizes cost impacts. Kind of the bigger the gorilla you are, you may not have to pay much as much for a load as a mom and pop. So that's those are the two big overarching themes that I'm looking at and I'm pushing for. And that'll give we'll see the visibility will help us see further down the road. It will help us to try to mitigate stuff before it becomes an issue. And then of course the leverage minimizes the liability. It doesn't eliminate the liability, but it does mitigate it. So you just kind of like you said, we all know rates are going to go up. Okay, been doing this a while. Rates are going to go up. The obvious question then becomes, if they do go up, how high a price are you going to have to pay?
Hmm.
And so to protect my company, I want to get as much leverage as I can to keep that rate increase reasonable so that it
Yes.
doesn't impact my customers or or my organization.
And you're using, and if you don't mind me asking, the leverage that you're looking at creating, is that more of giving less suppliers more business to create that leverage? Or is it more along the lines of, we're going to bring in a few more suppliers so everybody knows we got enough people in the mix to keep everybody like flatlined when it comes to massive spikes in rates? Like, can you share with us kind of how you're going to approach it, or how you might approach it, kind of thing? Give us a little
Sure,
inside
sure.
information there.
Every instance is different. It's almost a case by case basis, and you kind of got to weigh everything in the mix.
And
But
when you say instance, are you talking like lane per lane, or
it could be lane per lane.
commodity per
It could
commodity
be
kind of thing?
region. It could be commodity.
Okay. Yep.
One of the biggest things that we have on the docks, and I haven't, I'm still working on it, is provide working with a TMS provider that's also a managed transportation solution. The TMS will give us the visibility that we need.
Hmm.
We'll know where our freight volumes are and where they're going, and be able to come up with potential solutions that do not necessarily involve rates. It could be freight consolidation. It could be hub and spoke. It could be, pool points. It could be anything. You can, stuff you've learned through experience that worked. And then the other piece of it is the managed transportation piece is not only are we able to leverage our spend, but we're a part of them leveraging their spend through multiple customers. So that increases leverage tremendously and mitigates some of that rate increase across the board because they're pooling a larger thing of freight.
Yep.
They've got a larger pool. They're the ocean, I'm a pond, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of partnering with that and being a part of that with them. That's definitely gonna work in our favor, and that's definitely gonna minimize liability. So
Awesome. Okay. Okay. So now, are you also looking at, and I got to phrase this properly because I don't want it to be a mass call John and see if you can get on board, which is usually what happens. But like, are you looking to have new suppliers in for 2024 just in case things go awry, and more people to source kind of those spot loads for you? And what is your action steps preliminary with some of your contracted companies that you're sitting down with and saying, okay guys, here's kind of the plan for 2024?
Right. The way we try to do our pool is to me it's an ever evolving, growing thing.
Hmm.
You'll have carriers fall off due to price, due to service. You'll have new carriers come on board. So we try to have an even mix where we have seasoned veterans who we know will take care of our product, and then at the same time we're grooming new carriers to come on board and start testing them and getting them up to speed on how we do our business and what the demands are, and having that right mix of groups uh, kind of keeps everything kind of level set. And so that's, the contracted freight would be more in line with stuff that we ship consistently.
Yep.
um, every week I ship to ABC this load, blah blah blah, and then the spot market would be more of your kind of what I would call probably more brokerage type stuff, because you need
Yep.
that wide net if you're looking for a piece of equipment. Where the
Hmm.
contracted is probably going to lie more in your asset players, because they're going to be consistent. They have a backhaul where you're taking them to. They have that whole set up, so they keep their utilization up, which is, we
Yep.
all know that's what they want. Um, so it's a really kind of a big blend of stuff. You try to balance everything, try to balance the good with the bad, and keep everything kind of evolving and growing. And eventually, you don't want too many players, depending on the how your sales are going. And then at other times you want more than enough players. So
Hmm.
you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's part of my job as a logistics manager, per se, to make sure I have that balance, to make sure I have that capacity, but also make sure I have the sustainability.
Yes.
And what you're going to find, the people, the shippers out here who are more rate driven, in other words, lowest cost gets the load, those are the ones who are going to be struggling with capacity. So,
Yes.
we don't necessarily, we're not going to take the highest rate. We're not going to take the lowest rate. We're going to take somewhere in the middle that's a sustainable rate, that's a fair market rate, because we want the carrier or the broker to stay on that lane and manage that lane. And they will do that as long as it's a fair market rate and we're not driving them through the floor.
Yes, I agree with that. Question for you. Um, I feel like this is an interrogation, but I love it.
Where's the light you're shining in my face?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I should have my flashlight shining in the camera. So, um, with that being said, what are some of the things that are catching your attention when you're getting sales calls? What are some of the comments? What are some of the emails that you're saying, okay, you know what? I want to continue this conversation, or at least initiate a 20-minute conversation, see if we connect, and then kind of what is your step by step process for bringing supplier in? And I'll give you some context as to why I'm asking this, because, you know, one of the big things I see from a lot of my students for sales training is it's just taking forever to get in with people. And one of the things I've noticed, and I've in through asking people, is, volumes are down. Now your volumes might not be, because if people are still eating, your volumes are up. But I do a lot in the construction industry, so some of my customers' volumes are way down. And when we're talking to them, they're in this position where they're like, I understand the market's going to flip, and when it does, I got to make sure I'm taking care of everybody. So right now, when volumes that are 30%, we're normally doing 20 loads a week. And what they're doing is they're taking that volume, and they're splitting it up amongst their carriers. And this year, more than ever, I'm finding customers are being more vocal and saying, hey, listen, here's what's happening. Please, like, just stick with me. We're going to make it happen. It's going to turn around. It's just a little bit of a lull. As opposed to like that relationship and that long term development seems to be more at top of mind for customers these days, and when I say customers, meaning shippers,
Right.
manufacturers,
Right.
than it's ever been. Are you feeling the same way? And share with us kind of that timeline to give salespeople a little bit of understanding that, hey, you know what, this might
So basically, what you're telling me is a lot of other shippers are finally figuring out
be
what
the
I've
new
known
normal.
all
Probably. Yep.
along. I'm extremely relational in my business. People buy from people they know and trust. I also am not going to put my rep or my brand on somebody I don't know.
That is so. Say that again, because that I think is one of the key points that so many salespeople miss. You have a rep, you have a brand, you have image, credibility, and brand in your company.
Right. Well,
That's
the way
big.
it works when I go looking for employment, people are wanting my experience. People are wanting, it's just like going out. Not that I'm a star quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but people when they go looking for a star quarterback, they want somebody who's going to win the game, right? So the
Mhm.
last thing in the world that I want is my leadership questioning my ability to manage my supply chain. So if you take a fly by night carrier and you put a load on them, and it's a critical load, and they botch the deal, my leadership is not going to go to that carrier. My leadership is going to come to me and start asking me questions. Then they're going to start doubting me, and then I'm pretty much out of the game. So I am very careful on who I partner with. I am very careful on who I endorse or refer, all because of that brand, because it's a reflection of me. At the end of the day, it's a reflection of me. Am I doing the right things? Am I not? When it comes to one of the interesting things that I've seen recently, and this is really recently, you asked about solicitation and what methods stick out to me, right? So doing these types of podcasts, like what I'm doing here with you, and I've done a few others, and I enjoy. Number one, I enjoy doing them. I think it's great. Um, Happy to share any knowledge that I have, if it'll make somebody else more successful. But there are sales reps out there that are actually watching the podcast, and not necessarily a podcast like this one where you kind of cater to that sales organization. These people are getting online and reading, listening to podcasts that I do that wouldn't necessarily normally listen to a guy like me. Okay, but they're listening to what I'm saying, and they're picking it up. And I got, I think it was last week, I got a little postcard, handwritten postcard at the office, and this person, first of all, thanked me for, they saw the podcast, and they thanked me so much for sharing, and then they started pointing out the things that I said that they liked. And then it was kind of like, hey, hope to catch up with you soon. And I thought that was pretty good. I was like, okay, well, you're doing your homework, which I'm a firm believer in. You're actually listening to me and what I'm trying to say. You're trying to understand me. You're not just kind of glossing over and trying to take a shortcut. That's good. And it's a more personal, relational type message. I actually, on one of the podcasts I did, I had two people post. They had taken notes, which still boggles my mind to this day why people take notes on what I say. But they had taken notes, and what was really cool is one of the people who had taken notes. Evidently, they're a very visual person, so when they posted their notes, and I would literally take this thing off the internet and frame it. It's a bunch of graphics, hand drawn graphics, and notes, and statements that I made, and it's just like a collage of that whole podcast. And I had never seen that before in my entire career. I've never taken notes like that. I'll handwrite something down. I might doodle in the margins or something, but no, this person did a whole page, and it was literally a work of art. It looked to me like a work of art. I mean, I would literally frame it and hang it on the wall in my office. And it was just so creative, and it was very well done. Mine would have been stick figures. They were drawing like real people and stuff. So uh, that just, I never knew people learned like that. I mean, it makes sense to some, some people are more visual than others, and maybe that's what they need to do to take notes. But it was like, this is cool. I loved it, and so just listening to your customer. You said they're being more vocal now, which is great. Finally, uh, listening to your customer, understanding your customer. Don't put your customer in, don't pigeonhole your customer because every customer is different, just like every human being on the planet's different. They have different things that make them tick. They have different things that keep them up at night. Uh, some people are worried about something, and some people aren't worried about it at all. So they created unique experiences with with their potential customer. They respected their potential customer. They listened to them. They want to understand them, and that's all part of building that relationship. And that's how you get in the door. At least with me.
Mhm. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's some serious insight that a lot of people are going to, hopefully everyone watching and listening to this, hopefully you're taking this information in and you're writing notes down, or at least rewinding and fast forwarding and pausing and rewinding and playing and pausing and rewinding and playing and taking these notes down, because you're right, John. Everybody is individual, but I also see that um, there's a new, I'm going to say a newfound awareness with manufacturers and shippers. And are you seeing the same thing? And I think you said it great just a couple of minutes ago, where you said, finally, people are starting to see what I've seen for years, right? Now,
Right.
are you finding a lot more people that you speak to in your circle and stuff are having these same conversations?
I don't know so much on the shipper side because I don't really speak to a lot of shippers. Um, but I do what I have seen, and this is just me speaking for me. I have seen a lot of brokerages and carriers coming to me because that's really all I know, and they're wanting to have conversations just like this. Okay, um, there's a brokerage house down in Memphis that reached out to me on LinkedIn. He built a relationship. He's a sales manager guy, and he said, "Would you please? I have a really young sales team. Would you please speak to them, or let them ask you questions?" So what we're starting to see is something you've been doing for a while, is the brokers and the carriers are starting to say, "Hey, it's not all give me freight, give me freight, give me freight. It's help me understand the shipper so maybe I can be a better guy or gal doing what I do." And I mean, I was that brokerage house in Memphis. They had like 20 kids, and when I say kids, they're in their early 20s, so they're all kids. Um, and they're all sitting there. They're asking. They really sat down and they really took the time and they really come up with some really awesome questions. It wasn't just,
Mhm.
hey, can I get a free burger kind of stuff. No, no. These were really insightful, thoughtful questions. In fact, I broke down in the middle of the meeting and asked him, was this a calculus class? Because the questions were actually kind of hard. And, but they were sitting there, they were taking notes, they were writing. And then once we got off the call, I got several, LinkedIn invites, and they would send me notes and say, "Hey, man, appreciate you taking the time." They want to educate themselves to be better. It's You still have the spray and pray, you still have the dialing for dollars, and those guys, maybe volume, maybe quantity over quality, but the real ones who really want to be successful, they're the ones getting out there and asking those educational questions and trying to learn how to be better. And it's going to pay off for them in the long run. I mean, not just with me, but with any shipper.
What you just answered there, I think, was one of the key takeaways for a lot of people. And hopefully people got that, and hopefully people understand that, even though, and I guess one of the big things in this podcast that I wanted to get across to people was, even though the market is the way it is, people are still looking for good people to treat them right.
Absolutely.
And that's what I truly believe. And it might be, what we call on our sales side of the industry, a slower burn. But you know what? I think these people that are asking you to speak to their sales teams, I think these people that are sending you these notes, these people, this is all new ways that we as salespeople, we need to figure out new ways. Things that used to work don't work. Like I Don't think in the last 2 years, or maybe even two and a half, I've made a cold call before a meeting was scheduled. And the only reason is I found so many people were like, like, and it's just like, oh my God, you got another salesperson calling you. So I typically I'll send 5, 6 emails, I'll send a DM, maybe I'll send a video message. And then if I don't hear from them, then I'll give them a phone call.
Right.
And I'm just finding that it's that, it's kind of like that transformation. I don't know if you've seen it. And it's becoming where sending a text message and asking an individual if they have a moment is more polite than just picking up the phone and calling. And I don't know, part of me starts to say to myself, I record a nice customized video. Like, don't just record one and send it to 100 people and pretend it's customized like my day.
Exactly. I get that with usually it's LinkedIn instant messaging. They'll send it to me. And then also just something I do just out of common courtesy on, and I'm not in sales, but the first thing I usually ask people when I call them out of the blue was, "Hey, do you have a few minutes to speak?" And because you're being respectful of their time, time's money. You know that, I know that. Their time's as valuable as yours, and I'll ask them. If I've got a question I need to ask them, I'll do. Hey, how's it going? And then I said, "Do you have a few moments to talk?" And if they do, that's great. And if they don't, I'll say, "Hey, can I call you back in a little bit?" Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that form of those little forms of respect that most people either they weren't taught or they don't observe or they just ignore. Those things can really resonate with an individual, like a handwritten note. Okay, that's not it's not so much respect, but it's hey, it's I took the time to handwrite this note. It means
Mhm.
something. It has value, and people, at least in my age range, we pay attention to that. Do
Yes.
you respect my time? Do you really you cared enough to take a minute and send a handwritten note versus an email? I mean, those types of things I pick up on. I may not say anything about them, but I pick up on them
Yep.
because that's the generation I come from.
Mm. You know what? You said something there that, and I know we were just about to close off this podcast, and now you said something there that just piqued my interest. I remember that, and I appreciate that. And this is something that I often say to my students. I say, always act as if the person you're speaking to is literally taking it note for note. If you say you're going to call back on Wednesday at 2, like if I leave you a voicemail and say, listen, I haven't heard from you, I'll call you back Wednesday at, 2 p.m., call back Wednesday at 2
Right.
p.m. If you say I'm going to call you back Wednesday, call back Wednesday. Because here's what I see, and you confirm with me, please, if I'm somewhat on the right line here with you, as and again, everyone's individual, but with you. If I say to you when we are in the courting stage, if you will, you know what, John, I'm going to do this for you. I'll call you back on Wednesday, and then all of a sudden by Friday you don't hear from me. Are you thinking in your head, well, can't even call me back on time? How are you going to run my freight the way I want it right?
It is a barometer, yes.
Okay.
It's called if you're faithful in the little things, you'll be faithful in the big ones.
Hmm.
And I use a lot of those tests before I ever tender the first load. So usually if somebody messages me or reaches out to me and says, "Hey man," and can I set up some time with you? And it's like Wednesday, the first thing I'm going to ask them, mainly because my week is usually shot by Wednesday. Um, Occasionally you might get lucky, but the odds go way down by Wednesday. So I usually tell them, I said, "Do me a favor, call me first thing, reach out to me first thing Monday morning, and I'll get you on the schedule." And the ones that do get a meeting. The ones that don't.
And if the ones that don't reach out to you again on like a Tuesday or Wednesday and say, hey, can I get a meeting? Do you remember that they should have reached out to you Monday?
Oh yeah,
Good. Good.
absolutely. Now I do have some. I do like you. I have a lot of relationships on LinkedIn, and if somebody, if a relationship of mine wants to talk, and I talk to these guys periodically, just like I talk to you, and I tell them to call me Monday, and most of these guys are in the business. The whole week can go to shit. they get a little more grace than somebody new,
Yes. Yep.
because I
Yep.
know I know they're busy. I know he would have called me unless something blew up on him. So I'm just gonna chill, and he'll circle back around, and he'll reach out to me, and we'll set it up.
Got it.
So the
That
the,
makes
the relationships get more grace than the newbies.
Yes, 100%, because I mean the relationship they've proven themselves along the lines, and when they call when you have that conversation, it can be like, John, you'll never believe what I just went, and then it's kind of a camaraderie thing, right? Where you kind of
Yep.
go back and forth on war stories. But if you're, and that's why I said specifically too, like if you're just courting somebody,
Right.
your guys that you've worked with have proven themselves many times over that they are reliable. So if they miss on one thing, they're still reliable. They just, the day got ahead of them, right? It's,
Right.
to me, I
Exactly.
look at it and I say, on the flip side, when you're initially creating these relationships, there's no wavering room. And this is one thing that I share with everybody. I'm like, there's no waiver room. Act as if they're writing it in their calendar. And they might not, but act as if they are. And just
Exactly.
do that because it helps you, right? You're supposed to follow up on a certain day, follow up on that day.
Right. Making good on your commitments is the first step to building trust in a relationship.
Mm,
That's the very you're doing what you said you were going to do, and that's the building blocks of trust. The very basic rubber meet the road. That's where I'm going to be measuring you. I'm going to start there, and then you just kind of continue to build and build and build, and then that level of trust goes right up along with it. Hey, he told me he was going to call, he called. Hey, he told me he was going to do something, he did it. Hey, he told me he was going to deliver the load on time, he did it. You're just constantly stacking on that foundation of trust, just building it bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point you get to where you are the guys that I have a relationship with. And if you trip or slip or something comes up, then I'm going to say, okay, we've known each other for 2 years. He's hauled 200 loads for me. He's been late once. More than likely, they had a meltdown. He had to go take care of it.
yep.
You get the
Yep.
grace. That's what comes with it,
Yep.
because you make concessions for people that you trust.
Love that. John, thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here, brother.
Yes, sir, man. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon.
You got it.